He's here.
Milo.
He's here.
Let's all give a warm introduction to Todd Gloria.
He is here. I hadn't known. I'm glad and that was perfect timing coming out of Nick. So we'll pick up on the list after Nick after that, which jumps all the way to the S's for Shirley, so she'll know. But let me head over to my Word document here. Todd, where are you? Can you speak up so you pop up on my screen?
Right here, Milo. Hello.
There you are, right in the center now. You're in the Paul Lynn spot now. That's great. Really great to have you.
That just feels right.
Yes. I haven't seen you in so long that I think I looked like the headshot that they're still using of me in SDEBA. So great to see you and have you here with us. I want to give you a chance. There's probably some things you want to say. So let's start with a really easy question of, so Todd, what's new?
Yeah, it's been hanging out, just spending my quarantine at home watching Netflix.
Is there anything in particular you want to share before I go into some of the more specific questions?
I was thinking about joining you all. We spend our whole lives in Zoom, right, sitting in our respective places and going from one to the next. But as I was thinking about this one, Milo, really what I wanted to do was just to thank the association and all of your members. Some of you may know I have a very long history with what was originally GSDBA, now the Equality Business Alliance. I was the recipient of one of your scholarships many years ago.
Wow.
And I think about that from the standpoint of this most recent accomplishment of election night is not possible without a community who has believed in me long before I ever believed in myself. And so I wanted to be here to remind you all of your early investment in me as a student and as hopefully a future leader, and then what it has resulted in. And so really from a standpoint of, I hope that all of you experience this electoral victory as your own victory as well. I am very much a product of this community, this tightly knit community who helped make this possible. And I just wanted to be here this afternoon to express my appreciation and really a hope for a partnership going forward. I recognize that this is an extremely difficult time for businesses in general, but particularly for small businesses like many of those who are on the screen here. And while the city is not capable of solving all problems, we can certainly be a better partner. And I hope to be able to do that. And with the help of quality staff like Nick Serrano, I believe we will be able to do that starting, as he said, on December the 10th. So really just a message of appreciation and of partnership. I look forward to taking the last 20 years and building another 20 plus years onto this relationship with this organization. So with that, Milo, I'm happy to toss it back to you and answer any questions that you and the membership may have.
Great. I think we're all wondering, is it true that Mayor Faulkner is calling for a recount in multiple states and refusing to leave office on the 10th, or am I mixing up my elections?
You're mixing up your elections.
Okay, good.
It did take a good long while to concede, so there is some parallels there, but no, we're good to go. We're going to be, we have transition meetings, doing those every single day, putting together staff, and we're going to be ready to hit the ground running on December 10th.
Great. Speaking of that, the whole idea of transitioning, how has your experience as having been our interim mayor making that easier, or is that not so much of a factor?
No, I think it's very much a factor. And quite honestly, I think that was a part of why San Diego so overwhelmingly supported our campaign. These are difficult times, right? We have multiple crises going on at once, and it requires a steady hand. It requires a pro. I did the job for 8 months. I can do it for 8 years. And so to your direct question, Milo, about transition, it's been pretty smooth so far. There's definitely always more under the covers when you get in there and start finding out some stuff. But if you think back to what I was left with the last time I took over as mayor, where there really wasn't anyone left in the executive ranks of the city. Many people had either had quit or had been fired. And we were really left with not necessarily like a transition memo. We basically had 5 days notice to take things over. In this case, it's still a short amount of time, slightly more than a month, but it has been pretty seamless. And listen, I already know where the bathrooms are. I already know most of the faces. What we need to do is get right down to work. And that's, of course, addressing COVID and the economy, but also tackling the other crises. I'm thinking specifically of our homelessness crisis, our infrastructure challenges, and of course, our housing affordability crisis that impacts all of us.
So you brought up a couple of the points I do want to get to. In regards to COVID, some of what you can and can't do is prescribed by the governor, and then there are some things you do have choices to make, and you'll have more opportunity in your position as the mayor. So are there any policies or enforcements you see yourself doing differently than we've experienced so far, especially since, given that I'm interviewing this, if everybody's watching this in playback, just as we headed back into purple again?
Yeah, the timing isn't exactly great, right? We were hoping that we could be in a position of reopening, and sadly, I'm afraid that this current phase is going to be around for some time. So it is coloring my thoughts on what we can do. I spent the better part of 2020 working with businesses and other community leaders to come up with a blueprint for what we think we can do, call it the Back to Work SD plan, and had a number of folks, in fact, some members of the association participate in that. I think that probably the most important thing that we can do is have a customer service attitude at the city. I think the most common way businesses interact with the city of San Diego is through the Development Services Department. I would generally say that there is not necessarily an empowering of employees there. People often take too long to make decisions, and that delay and that time is money, and that can be the difference between a business staying open or a business going out of business. I think it's also true that some of the interventions we've had to date have been successful. Outdoor dining, I think, has not only been helpful to many businesses to stay afloat, but it has been well received by the public, and probably something we're going to have to, we should continue permanently. A lot of that is facilitated by the fact that the city is issuing permits swiftly and without fees attached to them. And that's the kind of stuff that we're doing under extraordinary circumstances. Milo, I'd invite people to think about what if that was our standard operating procedure as a city, really empowering folks to be able to move forward with their businesses. The other thing that comes to mind, and I think this is something that we can maybe work with together on going forward, the city spends over $500 million annually on contracts, on services, and for supplies. Those are contracts that are let out on a lowest bidder approach. I would argue for a best value approach, with value being defined by spending that money locally. Why we would choose to spend that money outside of our jurisdiction or outside of our state, and allowing those communities to benefit from the economic impacts as well, and particularly the hiring of people. I'd like to focus as much of that spending in our local city, allowing small businesses to benefit, hire more San Diegans, give them paychecks that they spend in our city, and operate as a form of local economic stimulus. That's just one of many ideas that we have, and we're going to see if we can get the council interested in that and see if we can do it. Because again, I don't think we're getting out of the woods in the situation in the next couple of days, weeks, or perhaps even months. Certainly the slow economy will be with us for more than a year or so.
Great answer on that stuff. You touched on the homeless in one or two of your points there. So I want to give you a chance to say, obviously a huge problem, no quick solutions to it, but what are some plans you have in mind that we might not have seen so far?
Yeah. Well, thank you for acknowledging that it's no quick solution.
Right.
This is by far the most complex issue that I can think of in social policy, but that is not a reason to surrender. That's a reason to engage and be more purposeful in our efforts. You all have given us a great opportunity. We have a new mayor and new city council who I think are aligned with making this a priority. You've also given us a county board of supervisors that for the first time, I think, will actually prioritize this issue. And that alignment is going to be determinative, in my opinion. As you may know, the city of San Diego has a housing commission. We know how to build housing and subsidize housing for low income and no income people. The county has a health and human services agency with responsibility for mental health, substance abuse, and behavioral health. When you take housing and you marry it with services, that's how you end homelessness. And so I'm actually meeting soon with County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher. If we can align their services with our housing dollars, I think that will go a long way towards addressing the homelessness crisis. And I want to just leave you with this thought on the issue of homelessness. I know it feels impossible to solve this issue. It is so complex and the issues are so acute. But I want you to know that there are cities across this nation that are being certified by the federal government as ending chronic homelessness. That seems impossible when San Diegans hear it because of the size and acuity of our problem. But if cities like Provo, Utah, and Rockford, Illinois, and the state of Virginia with regard to veterans homelessness can achieve a functional end of that issue in their communities, there's no reason why San Diego can't. I think these new elected leaders can give us an opportunity to do that.
Great. I'm going to jump topics quickly because we don't have much time. After there's such a raising of awareness in 2020 from the Black Lives Matter movement, the LGBT community seems pretty split on the question of whether to welcome the police to the next Pride event, be that in 2021 or 2022. I just wondered if you could speak to that.
Yeah, well, as the next mayor of the city, I have the awesome honor of leading 11,000 employees. In our form of government, they work directly for the mayor. I look at this with a slightly longer view in the sense that I remember every bar I went to as soon as I turned 21 didn't have windows. And that was because we were afraid of raids. And we have come a long way as a community, and we have to remember and honor and to celebrate that history. We also have to acknowledge that there are members of our community, particularly Black and Brown members of our community, who don't have that same interaction with law enforcement. I see my friend Fern is here, And I'm hopeful that we can have the kinds of conversations between Pride and the center with the police department. I have been a leader when it comes to police reform in the California legislature. And I hope that that gives me the credibility to sit down with those who want change and to bring our police chief to the table and figure out a way forward. I think it would be regrettable if we could not have law enforcement in the parade. I think it sends a strong signal for how far we've come as a community. But I recognize that there's a conversation that has to be had with elements of our community who don't feel the same level of comfort that I feel. And I say that as a person of color, the comfort that I feel. And I recognize that's a position of some privilege. We have, the good news is that we have, well, God willing, we get to have a parade in person in 2021. But we have some time to figure this out. And between Fern and Kara and Chief Nizlight, who is a true ally, he is a strong ally. We met just the other day. He supports our community aggressively. So I don't think there's any reason why we can't get to a place where we can continue to meet together and celebrate our progress and commit to doing the work forward. I think we all know that within our community, there are divisions. We can certainly do better by our transgender community. We can do better by our bisexual community. We can do better by amongst our Black and Brown communities. I hope that all of us can commit to doing that work.
Fantastic. When I posted that I was going to be interviewing you, I asked people, what kind of questions do you want Mr. Gloria to answer? And I was surprised how many people said bike lanes. So considering the effect that it's having on traffic and parking, I wanted to give you a moment to talk on that.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm not actually surprised by that at all. And, you know, I think it's in part because we have not done a good job of creating transportation choices in San Diego. You know, if we'd had this meeting in person, I would guarantee that the vast, vast, vast majority of us would have gotten to wherever we were meeting by car. And it wouldn't be because we necessarily wanted to, it's because it's the only option that we have. I'm committed to building a world-class transportation system for San Diego, one that gives you choices. I think all of you, if I were in your home right now, would open up your closet and find tons and tons of clothes, right? Because you like different choices. You chose you chose an orange shirt today, Milo, but you had other options. Right now, you have no choice when it comes to transportation, and it's time we change that. I think some of the hesitancy that we see in the community is simply because you have not seen it. And what little you've seen, it isn't a connected network. I hear a lot of people say, well, we have these buffered bike lanes on 4th and 5th Avenue, and no one uses them. Well, I would liken that to putting a quarter mile of highway out in the middle of nowhere and not connecting it to anything or anyone, and wondering why no one's driving on that highway. We need to build a connected network. And the last thing I would say is that I think a lot of that hesitancy comes from the concerns about parking losses. And let me tell you, I have a little bit of history where this is concerned. When they proposed having a bus rapid transit lane down Park Boulevard between Hillcrest and University Heights, at the initial proposal, there was the suggestion of losing dozens and dozens of parking spaces along Park Boulevard, and many of those businesses were very opposed to that. As your city council member, I was able to work with MTS, Sandag, and the business community. And Milo, I will tell you, we did not lose parking spaces in that corridor. We gained parking spaces in that corridor by converting unused driveways that were now available for parking. By going to angled and head in on the side streets, we net more parking. Same is true in the middle of Hillcrest for the buffered bike lane down University Avenue. Yeah, you lost a couple spaces in front of Ace parking, but we replaced them on the side street on 10th Avenue. And so the net gain, again, of parking spaces. This doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. And what I'd ask of everyone is to stay at the table and work on sensible solutions. I recognize this is going to be a transition, but like many things that I remember people coming up to the city council and raising hell and saying they're opposed, often after they're actually implemented, it's very hard to find those opponents, because if we do it right, people embrace it. And I think particularly about, say, for example, NTC, where there was a lot of people aggressively opposed to the conversion of that base into what it's become today. I think most of us can acknowledge that that is a jewel in our community. And what I'd ask you to do is to stay at the table and provide those, be a part of the solutions that find those off-street parking spaces, those angled spaces on the side streets. This does not have to be bicyclists versus motorists. This can be about giving you choices when it comes from getting from A to B.
Fantastic. I'll ask final question to leave you on, because I want to be respectful of your time. You were in a city where only 12 years ago, 62% of the residents here voted yes on Prop 8 to prevent marriage equality, not the progress we would have liked to have seen in 2008. And 2020 here, not only did we have our first gay candidate, but first elected official as mayor. So I'm just curious, did you face any challenges with that, and where do you see that moving forward?
You know, I wish I could say that I didn't, but I know that I did. And many of you saw that. Some of you reached out to me about it. You got anonymous text messages suggesting that I support sex offenders and pedophiles. And that was not accidental. All of you know the homophobic tropes about gay men and children. And all of you who know me know that that is not what I support. But someone felt comfortable enough to use that smear against me. Didn't work. And I think that's a testament to how far we've come as a community. That's largely because so many of you have taken the courageous step out of the closet and shown people who and what our community is and what our priorities are. When I'm asked what the gay agenda is, I always remind folks, gay people pay rent too. And so we care about housing affordability. I remind gay folks drive cars and ride bicycles. And so we care a lot about potholes. But to the extent that someone felt that it was necessary or appropriate or would be effective to tell people that I support pedophilia, you recognize how there's still work to be done. I'm just hopeful that because those allegations were not successful, that we were able to break this barrier. And it really speaks to the kind of community we live in. But we have more work to do. And the trick is never to just be the first, it's to make sure that you're not the last. And so while I have the honor of being the first, let's continue to do the work to make sure that when I'm done, people will say that, we will continue to consider and potentially elect openly LGBTQ people to be the chief executive officer of the 8th largest city in the country.
When you're done. Hopefully that's quite a while off and looking way back on COVID like a nightmare in the past. So you have the opportunity to really take America's finest city where it has the opportunity to be again. Mr. Gloria, thank you so much for being with us today, and Nick for helping arrange it. Let's all give him an applause round.
Thank you, Milo. Thank you, Milo.
And we'll get back to our network.
Always call me
Todd.
Oh, thank you. I was trying to remember to say Mr. Gloria. It was just hard. So
yeah, no,
I'm glad I don't have
to. I don't care what title I have. Todd is always best.
Glad to hear it.
Todd, before you go, it's time to change your Zoom line to Mayor-elect Todd Gloria.
Fair enough. We will do that we'll do that. We'll take care of that. Thanks,
By the time he works it out, he'll be mayor.
Yes. Guys,
Okay.
thank you so much. Be well and stay safe, okay?
Thanks. You're welcome to linger, but I'm going to let the people continue to introduce themselves. And we had someone jump up into the R's here. So, because it's Reverend Suzette, you are welcome to talk.